afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennie Montgomery. Thanks for joining me for this live Jennie Show as we strive to bring you information relevant to living our lives in the COVID pandemic. You know, we have been through a lot. Many of us have been sick. We've lost loved ones. And when you'd think the challenges of COVID would pull us together, politics is pulling us apart. You know what they say, be careful when your dinner time conversation turns to religion or politics. And now, after a bitter election season, recounts, runoffs, and the recent violence at the U.S. Capitol, Americans are more divided than ever. Many are praying for a peaceful transition of power tomorrow at the presidential inauguration of Joe Biden, an event that's seeing unprecedented security measures in Washington, D.C. and state capitals all over the country. For a lot of us, engaging in political discussions right now feels risky, to say the least. Sharon Schweitzer is an attorney and international etiquette expert. She's a diversity and inclusion consultant, cross-cultural trainer, and the founder of Access to Culture. Sharon works with global organizations, law firms, and universities, and a lot more to improve business communication. And she has practical ways for us to navigate uncomfortable, even unwanted, political conversations. And Sharon, I think that this is such an important topic. It's so relevant right now as we're getting ready for this inauguration of our next president, to talk about some of the tips that you have for navigating political discussions that might get a little bit uncomfortable for people. We've really seen it in our country a lot recently.
Well, thank you, Jennie. I'm delighted to be here with you and your viewers. It is a difficult time, and having respectful conversations can be a challenge. I think one of the most important things all of us can do is know our audience before we launch into a discussion. Sometimes that can be a little bit challenging. Right now, we're seeing a lot of shifting alliances. People are going across the aisle, and they are changing their way of thinking. So before you hop into a political discussion or accept the invitation to join one, it's probably a good idea to test the waters and know who you're chatting about politics with.
You know, read the room. That's an important thing. Read the room, like you say, know what your audience is. One thing that you also say, it's okay if you choose not to participate. You know, you don't have to share your political views. I know with some of my family members, that's just the easiest way for me. I know with some of my family members, that's just the easiest way for me to have a civil dinner. You know, if we've come together, we don't see each other often, and they're very differing political views, and I just prefer, I'll listen, but I'm not necessarily going to give a lot of input because I don't like to get into it like that with people. And you think that there are times when it's okay not to share your views?
That's right. Sometimes silence is the best method. And it can be either at a family dinner, or many times our readers are telling us that they find that it's really important in the workplace, sometimes on a Zoom call. They find that they are asked that question, well, are you either going to watch the inauguration, or what are your thoughts on what happened with the protests? And they're really not comfortable sharing their views because they don't know what their boss or supervisor are, and this person signs their paycheck and has an influence on their payment. Either a client or a customer can be the same way. So sometimes they want to remain silent, and the quandary is, how do you do that and remain respectful? So some of the responses that you can give are things like, well, no, I am still watching how things are developing, and it's really been interesting to observe all the different ways the situation is evolving. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable sharing my opinion, but what are your thoughts? And kind of pivot and put back to them.
I like that. I like that, being able to pivot like that. It's also important to reconcile conflicting beliefs.
Yes, it is. And you can find yourself where, even though you've remained silent, or maybe you haven't said anything, you know, it ends up in a disagreement, because some folks just like to have a lively discussion. And when that happens, you just have to say, well, that is an interesting point of view, or thank you for sharing your thoughts. And then segue to another topic. Ask them something they find is a passion of theirs that they find interesting about that football game, or how about that basketball game, especially if their team won, and get them off on another topic that they enjoy talking about, maybe a son or daughter or a pet, and then you can leave that political hot ball topic.
You also say that it's important to find a balance, and you really have to stay in touch with your own emotions doing this, finding that balance.
Yes, you do. You have to be authentic to yourself, and you need to make a decision. Maybe in the past you've talked politics, and it's to the point now where it's so divisive you don't want to do it anymore. You can make that decision. But what you want to do is, before you go maybe on Zoom or a Zoom, cocktail hour, make a decision. What do you want to do? Are you going to remain silent? Are you going to keep your views to yourself? Don't kind of change horses in midstream. Make a decision about what you want to do and how much you want to share, and then stick to it.
And then stick with it. That's really, really good advice. I like also how you talked about how sometimes in the past you've had people that you could talk politics with, but we have just reached a point in our country where it is so divisive that it can just be very uncomfortable. And like I said, I sent some of that with my own family. There are people that I just can't get into it with, because nobody's going to change anybody's point of view. And if you can't be respectful that you have differing opinions, it's just going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be ugly.
It can be that way. That's the thing about political discourse. You may or may not change someone else's opinion. If you are going to have the discussion, it's best to have research and have backup from a respected institute or a respected scientific source that backs up your opinions. And you don't want to select a resource that is going to aggravate the other person, especially if you know that they can't stand that institute. You want to have something that is going to really back up your opinion. And if that still doesn't, the best thing to do is close the conversation. Depending on who it is you're talking to, people really get heated, and it's best not to have those conversations and decide, it's not worth it. I really value the relationship with this person, and I don't think politics is where we need to go. We're going to go in a different, more positive direction.
That's a really great way to frame it. I like that, because that is true, and especially with people that we love. But when there's situations where we know that this isn't a good place for us to be, let's move the conversation elsewhere. Really good advice. I have one quick thing to ask you before we close this conversation. As an etiquette expert, I'm sure that you would be very well versed in helping guide people as they get ready for this formal inauguration of our next president. How can you imagine what it's like in Washington right now when there's so much emphasis on security and so much other stuff going on? Do you think that we're going to be able to pull it off with the right manners?
Well, the thing about the United States, we are a group of many diverse cultures and diverse subcultures, and we all have our own cultural conditioning, and many people respond and react in many different ways. So I think we're just going to have to stay tuned and watch and hope, and let's pray that it goes off well and goes off smoothly. That's all we can do. I practice law attorney, and I never tried to figure out what the jury was going to do, and in this case I certainly am not going to try with this one either.
Nope, just going to pray about it and watch it and hope it all plays out safely, and that we move forward. Sharon Schweitzer, thank you so much for your time. It's always good to talk to you, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, Jenny. Happy New Year to you and all your viewers.
Thank you.